Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Lawbogadas with your co-hosts, Missy Duarte and Connie Peña. We are two lawyers, Latinas, and moms on a mission to bring awareness and perspective about the issues important to you. I'm Missy Duarte. I'm a licensed attorney in New Jersey and Florida with my office located in Hackensack, New Jersey, where I practice personal injury law. I represent accident victims to get compensated for their injuries, pain, and suffering as a result of the negligence of another person, business, or entity.
And I'm Connie Peña. I'm a licensed attorney in the state of Florida, practicing family law and family-based immigration, helping families and individuals transition into new phases of their lives.
Now, follow us. Our handle is Lawbogadas on all platforms. That's Instagram, that's Facebook, that is, where the heck are we? YouTube, Spotify. We are everywhere. You cannot get away from us. I'm just kidding. Please catch up on our latest episodes anytime on Instagram, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. You can also feel free to send us a DM on Instagram or email us at info@lawbogadas.com. Now, today is a very special episode. I am interviewing my co-host, Connie Peña, in the realm of her area of practice, which is marital and family law. And there are special concerns that can come up specifically in these areas of practice that oftentimes are kind of glossed over, but are super uber important and should actually be at the forefront of, this particular area and should be at the forefront of common issues that do come up with your clients. Isn't that right, Connie?
Yes. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, I wish people would have considered these things in advance, right? A lot of people think of marital and family law as divorce, and I'm not thinking about divorce. That's not going to happen. I truly wish that was the case for everyone. But you know what, Missy? It's not always sometimes divorce. Sometimes other things happen. Sometimes life throws you curveballs that you weren't expecting. And if you haven't thought about these things that we're going to go over today for your, as an individual and as a couple, and as a part of a bigger, just a family, it can really cause a lot of problems. And perhaps maybe your marriage could have been saved had you discussed these things, right? Sure. It's not even about what the issue is. It's the fact that you never talked about it. Yeah. And it creates a lot of problems later on. So I definitely like to focus on the long term with my clients, have them think about the logistics and have them think about the practicality of the decisions that they're making when they are in my office, right? Because usually when they come to me, we're here for a divorce or a separation, from a co-parent, right? Or because there's an immigration issue that's kind of involved in that, right? Maybe you petitioned for your spouse or you were the receiving individual in the family law and the immigration case, or maybe now you're petitioning for a child you have abroad from before you were moved here, or a parent. And all of these things just make up our life, right?
Yeah. Well, before we jump into that, can you tell us about, and the listeners, where exactly you practice in Florida and a little bit more about your area? I'm really interested. I find your area of expertise really fascinating because you kind of, with all of the issues that come up, there are multiple areas that come into play. So you are simultaneously delving into multiple practice areas. So I would love our listeners to learn more about that.
Yeah, I practice in South Florida in the Tri-County area, Miami, Broward, Palm Beach County. And the kind of cases that I handle are the marital and family law realm, which is divorce, paternity, custody issues, child support issues, alimony issues, prenups. And I also handle family-based immigration. So I limit my immigration practice to just family matters, which is usually petitioning for a spouse or a fiance, a parent, or a child. Or the divorce involves one of those individuals. So, perhaps you are getting divorced from your spouse by which you received your green card through that marriage, and you're in the timeline where this could be a problem for you, right? So, especially working with the Latino community, there's so many of those kinds of people out there that are worried not only about what is my life going to look like now that I'm separating or divorcing this person, what is my immigration status going to look like? And how is that going to affect my ability to live and work here and raise my family and my children here? So
Right.
that's the area that I focus on.
And that, I mean, that goes into that whole, your whole point and your stress about the transition into the new phases of your life and getting into that.
Exactly. It's not just a transition from being married to single, right? It's a transition of perhaps like I did. You met someone while you were abroad on vacation. That's how I met my husband. We had to deal with the immigration part of it, and we have to deal with the regular stresses of marriage and all these other things. And, it's not just about ending a relationship, it's also starting one. So these are all things that are forever entwined
Right.
and that need to be considered.
Right. So just on its face, it's just not enough of that specific situation. You're also invested into like the long-term results, if you will, or what's going to happen long-term wise, and the considerations that have to come into play because of maybe like an action or an inaction when it comes to like a significant milestone or event in one's life.
Exactly. Exactly. So, sometimes, like I said, these new chapters or new phases of our lives are by choice. Someone wants to end a relationship, someone cheated, something like that. But it could be something positive, right?
Yeah.
It could be something like entering into a relationship, needing to have these financial conversations, needing to understand, how a prenup works, what can be in it, what can't be in it, if you want one, if you don't want one,
Mhm.
um, rather than just the social stigmas of what that entails. And also what it's going to look like if you have that added layer of someone who needs, to be petitioned as a fiance or as a spouse.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, let's just dive in. What are some of the common issues that you think that you deal with on a regular basis in your practice?
So I see a lot of people for the whole, should I get married or should I not get married? Right? We have a lot of people in our society today who are electing to cohabitate instead of get married.
Hmm.
And that's fine. My point is not get married, don't get married, do this, don't do this. It's think about the what's going on. Think about the long-term things that you want in your life and think about the possible pitfalls as you're planning for your life. We can only plan so much and control so much. There are curveballs that are going to be thrown at us, and those are the things that we need to be worried about. So, that conversation of to get married or not get married, there's the whole, should I petition for my spouse as a fiance or as a spouse? Do I get married first or do I get married later? Right? Those are very important questions. If I have a prenup, isn't that just mean I want a divorce? Well, actually, a prenup also deals with death, right? The inheritance rights that we have. Are you a couple that is on your second or third marriage and you have children from a previous relationship? Are you older? Do you have businesses? Do you have things that you've already set aside or a way that you want to dispose of your property when you pass away that's unrelated to your marriage? And not because you don't love your spouse and you don't want to leave them anything, but there are different considerations to have.
Yeah.
Financial expectations. That's a big one in this whole to get married or not get married kind of situation. There are protections in Florida that the law gives you when you are a spouse, a legal spouse. We don't have common law marriage in Florida. So it doesn't matter that you've lived together for 20 years as quote unquote husband and wife. I've even met people that call each other husband and wife and they've literally never gotten married.
Hmm.
Do you
And
know
that's
what's going to
big in our
happen?
community. That's
Oh
really
yeah.
big in our
Oh
community.
yeah. I've had people tell me that. No, what do they say? Juntos. We're just juntos. We're just together, right? And even though we bought a house and we have 3 kids and we've been together for 30 years, they never really got married. Well, what does that mean today, right?
Mhm.
Um, and what does it mean for you as someone who has moved into a house with your significant other that they own? What happens down the line if you guys split up and you've been helping pay that mortgage? Or that individual has an accident and passes away? Who are you getting that house? Are you
Right.
sure? Do you know for a fact? Or are you making an assumption, right? And the third biggest issue I get is issues with raising children and who we choose to have children with, right? I've seen problems as little as not being happy with the food that's being given at the other parent's house, to other things about, are babysitters allowed and how do we pick a babysitter? And do I have to tell you which babysitter I'm getting on my day?
Right.
Is my child allowed to stay at a sleepover? We're from mixed religion household. Well, what if Hanukkah and Christmas fall on the same day or week? What are we going to do then?
Right.
So there's a lot of things to think about, where it's not just about, a divorce, but it could be because of a disability or a tragic death.
Well, what do you say to people when they're like, well, there are some folks that are of the school of thought that like, well, if you get a prenup or if you do these, put these documents in place, like you're kind of setting up the situation for failure to begin with. What would you say to somebody in that position?
Well, I get that all the time. So what I tell them is, if you are not capable of having these conversations today, your marriage is going to fail.
Hmm.
Because if you can't talk today about how you expect the bills in the home to be paid, is it going to be pro rata? Is it going to be based off of your percentage of incomes? Are you going to have a joint bank account? Are you going to put all your full paycheck in that joint bank account? Or are you going to contribute only what you're planning to contribute to the home? What if one of you makes significantly for more than the other? Is it going to be 50-50? Like, there's all of these things that people then start building up,
Yeah.
like, look, I'm married and I know from personal experience and life experience, there's no such thing as the perfect marriage. These reels, these Instagram posts we see, they're crap. Okay. Uh, Being married is an effort that has to be made, and it has to be an ongoing conversation, and not having them and just pushing these feelings down and creating animosity and creating resentment towards each other because you never talk about it is what's going to be a big problem. Not the fact that you signed this paper to begin with, because at least now you're both clear. You're
Right.
both clear on, if I'm not willing to pay you alimony as my spouse, then you should better say, well, then I'm never going to be a stay-at-home mom,
Hmm.
right? Because, but what if that was your plan? What if your plan is to stay at home when you have children, but you have a prenup that says you're not getting alimony? Well, this is a life planning issue. This is not a prenup issue. This is your marriage and your expectations on how to live your life going to work out together. So having the prenup conversation helps you actually talk about it now instead of when it becomes a problem.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, and that's, I've had people tell me, "Oh, well, I never told her to stay home." I'm like, "Well, you also didn't get a divorce 20 years before. You
Yeah.
reaped the benefits of this relationship that you acquiesced to,
Right.
and now you're complaining about it." And then, we have the other side of the coin of what I'm going to receive. We don't have a prenup, we don't have anything. What I'm going to receive is not enough. It's
Yeah.
not enough to continue living the lifestyle that I expected to continue living. So,
Right.
it creates an issue. Um, so, the one of the biggest issues that I see, Missy, honestly, is about the house.
Mm.
Because a lot of people don't understand how, oh, but the house is only in my name. Well, the classic attorney answer, it depends, right? Like, am I going to get anything? Well, I don't know. Are you married? Are you not married? Was the house bought before the marriage, during the marriage? Did you have a prenup? Did you not?
Right.
Right? Did you live in it, or was it a second home? Was it an inherited home? Did you contribute anything to it? There's so many questions. Why don't you want to know that now instead of later?
And
Right?
that's exactly what I'm thinking about. It just forces you in the best way to have, the very difficult conversation at a time where you're both, like you said, clear. So both of you have a better understanding of where each party is as to a specific issue that can bring up, right? Um, Rather than waiting for, the stressor of, God forbid, something difficult, kind of inserting itself into your life or just happening into your life. And now on top of all the stressors, like now, you really don't have any direction of where things are, like what is going to happen when this situation arose that you could have kind of dealt with in the beginning. I understand.
Exactly. Exactly. And when we're dealing with this whole prenup conversation, everyone's happy until they're not. And it's a very sad reality, that people become vindictive at the end. Um, I've seen people that the conversation during the marriage was they were on the same page, but when the moment has come now that someone wants out, oh, well, I don't care. Yeah, I may have said that during the marriage, but the law doesn't require me to continue with that promise. So
Yeah.
too bad.
Right.
And especially if someone cheated or if something like that happened, people get very angry. And I
Mm,
understand you being angry. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything. And you know what? In Florida, a lot of people don't understand. We have a no fault divorce. Cheating is not relevant unless it affected the finances of the marriage.
mm,
So just because your spouse is sleeping with everyone, unless it affected the finances or you can objectively prove that somehow this is going to affect like a child issue, it's not relevant. You
mm.
may be super mad and rightfully very upset, but there's a lot of things that causes the problem, that anger, that violation of the loyalty, of the trust, that now you're not willing to be on the same page you would have been
Right,
back when in the beginning, right?
right. Now, not so clear.
Right now it's not so clear,
Not
you
so
know.
clear.
And my biggest thing for my clients and just people in general is don't bet on something you don't have control over, right? And this doesn't even necessarily mean you must get a prenup. There are things that if you are cohabitating and you're not married, there may be other things that you can do, but you're not going to have a prenup because you're not married, right? Um, have the talk. I'm living in your house. What is going to happen later on,
Mm,
right? Talk about it, because just because you're not married doesn't mean you don't have an intention to be together for a long period of time, especially if you have children,
right.
right? I've heard people bet on alimony, say, I'm not going to go back to work. I've been married 10 years. And if I go back to work, I'm not going to get alimony. And then when I have the talk of, but do you understand how much it costs to maintain two households instead of one? Do you
Mm,
understand that you're going to be only getting a certain amount of money and that money is not going to be enough to live the same way that you did during your marriage? Do you understand the math? Do you know what rent costs and how renting is probably going to be more expensive for you than
right.
buying something, but you're not going to qualify to buy anything because you don't have an income history,
Hmm.
or what if, yeah, you're thinking that today and God forbid your spouse that you're relying on paying you alimony gets disabled,
Right.
or the industry that they work in falls apart and they're not capable of making the same amount of money anymore. Let's forget about a divorce. What are you going to do with your family?
Right.
Right? How are you going to pay your bills if the person that is the bread maker has suffered some type of loss that no longer allows them to? We saw this in 2008 in the recession. How many people lost their jobs, lost their homes, lost all of these things? So don't bet on things that you are expecting or anticipating because you can't always control it,
Yeah.
right?
That and
Um,
from the alimony standpoint, like especially like when you have, I think children, and correct me if I'm wrong, like depending on, is it dependent on someone's age? But if there's like an ability to work or the capacity to work, like aren't you supposed to like make efforts to try to do that? So I mean, a lot of people kind of bank on the whole, I'm just going to live off my alimony, but courts might not be so accepting of that. Or what is your experience in terms of how the courts have been addressing that issue?
So in Florida, I mean, it's basically three things that we look at for alimony. It's the length of the marriage,
Mm,
which on paper in the statute, the length of the marriage is a lot longer than on in real life because a short-term marriage is less than 7 years in Florida. A lot of people are not lasting 7 years married, right? A
ouch.
medium marriage is 10 to 17 and over 17 is long term. I don't know a lot of people have been married 17 years these days, right? Our generation is getting married much later as well.
Mhm.
So you're not really there yet. But they're looking at the length of the marriage, the financial need, and the ability to pay.
Mhm.
Um, I've seen cases where the household is surviving off of a very low income. How is that very low income going to do two households?
Right.
Right. And yes, we do look at, that's why we say the need and the ability to pay, because it's all an it depends factor, right? How long have you been without work? Well, what did you used to do before? Is it something that you can go back to school or get a certification and go back into it? But we have to remember, as women, especially as Latin women, that's the group that we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
We already get paid less in general. Imagine being out of the workforce for a period of years, right? What kind of job are you realistically going to get with no recent job history, no recommendations, no, up to date things? it's going to be very, very hard in terms of being realistic. And also the law changes. We just
Right.
had in Florida a bill that was written, and I'm going to assume it's written by men that pay alimony, um, that got vetoed, luckily, by the governor because they wanted to completely revamp a lot of areas of family law. But one of the biggest things was alimony, that they wanted to get rid of permanent alimony. They wanted to cap how much someone can get. They wanted to make it a mathematical calculation versus this need ability kind of scenario I'm talking about.
Mm.
And the only reason it was vetoed is because they wanted to make it retroactive, meaning
Oh,
if you signed in this marital settlement agreement 5 years ago for permanent alimony in the amount of X, basically someone could go and be like, guess what? The law changed. See you later. I'm not paying this anymore. And obviously that's not fair. You've entered into a
right.
contract. It should be respected, right?
Right.
But what if that wasn't there? What if the retroactive part wasn't there and it was just agreements from here on out? Well, now what you've been relying on in your mind is gone,
Right.
right? So, those are my concerns. And in terms of like a summary of what I consider to be important, and the biggest piece of advice that I can give people, just a general advice: have the tough talks, because if you don't, you're setting yourself up for failure.
Hmm.
If you can't have these conversations, your relationship, whether it's marriage or cohabitation, is not going to survive, right? What if I need to bring over my dad who's not doing well and can't live alone anymore, that lives abroad? Well, I need to petition for him. What is that going to mean? Where is he going to live? Is he going to be entitled to anything here, and how long? Right? These are big questions, which just affect us, as and especially in our community, we're much more involved with our families in a larger, in a general respect. So these are things that you need to be able to talk about, because it's a lot. It's a lot
Right.
to do. And I personally feel like everyone should have a way to be financially independent, in case things don't work out, for better or for worse, right? It's very upsetting for me and sad when there's nothing that I can do. There's
Mm.
nothing that I can do for someone who this is all that they're going to be entitled to, or this is all the judge awarded you, right? Or this is all that child support is. And there's nothing that I can do for you beyond that. And now you have to go figure it out. And now you have to go out and get 2 jobs, or see who you leave your kid with, because if not, you're not going to be able to pay your bills, and it's very sad. Um, but I strongly feel like that. I'm not talking about, oh, everyone be a boss, hustle, blah, blah, blah. No, but we need to have ways of being financially independent, or put into place protections for ourselves
Mhm.
in case some kind of tragedy happens, because
Absolutely.
you never know. You never
Absolutely.
know if this person that you have loved for so long blindsides you. I've had divorces, Missy, that were initiated because someone found the other person cheating with someone of the same sex, and their mind is blown,
Mhm.
right? Like their image of their life is now shattered. Um, or they find out this person has been maintaining another family somewhere else. Like there's crazy things that happen. And so, it is what it is. And, I mentioned to you once before, I had a client who her husband got hit by a train.
Yeah.
Just like no life insurance, no nothing,
Right.
young, 3 little kids. Like, what do you do?
Right.
And she was a stay-at-home mom, no life insurance, 3 children, and it's very unfortunate. That's why I firmly believe everyone needs to have a path to financial independence, for better or for worse. Consider your long-term decisions of your life, how you want your life to look, what you want your retirement to look like, the
Right.
lifestyle you want to have,
Right.
how you want to raise your children. Because if you can't talk about these things, unfortunately, you're going to be in my office.
Correct.
And
Yeah.
so I find that it's really important to get into it and delve into it. And if you're afraid of having that conversation, why? Why are you afraid of having that conversation?
It's
Right?
uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable.
Of course, it's uncomfortable, but a lot of people are kind of afraid of what they're going to hear.
Right.
And if you don't hear it now, you're going to hear it later. And so it's scary. I get it. That's why we have therapists and people to talk to and lawyers to confide in. But,
Right.
you know, we have to be able to talk about these things. And even if you're not at the point where you feel comfortable talking to your significant other about it, you need
Right.
to have that internal conversation
Yes.
and understand everything that you're doing and the decisions, and just be educated and understand, um, so that you can kind of take control of where you need to be and move forward no matter what happens.
I have and it's interesting we're talking about this. I have a friend who was posting on social media about her and her husband often go away and do these like wonderful trips together. And I guess they each were doing a different activity that I guess the other spouse enjoyed more, or and she would always say, like in her post, like, because marriage is a compromise. So, tying in like the kind of the takeaway that we're doing here, it's like, why not a better time than now, when you both are, clear-minded, you both, are so happy about, this transition of wherever, married or not, or wherever your, life is taking you. Why not have these conversations, at one of the best moments in your life, when you both are clear and you can both be on the same page and you both are in the capacity to or more able to compromise and work through these issues that unfortunately can come up without any prompting.
Yeah, I mean, it's not about presenting your significant other with a thesis of my expectation for my life, a memoir, right? No.
Right.
Um, we can't all think of every possible scenario,
Right.
but especially as things come up, there are big issues that we all know are going to be around, and like as simple as, do I want children or not, something like that. And then there's smaller things that maybe as they move forward, you need to talk about them. If you live with your significant other, you guys rent an apartment, you rent. This is talk going to come up one day about, let's buy a house. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
well then let's talk about, okay, let's talk about what would it look like to buy a house? How are we going to do the deed? How are we going to do the down payment? Right? Like, I think that a lot, I'm very happy that our generation is much more open to this discussion about therapy and trauma and all these other things that perhaps the generation before us was not.
Yes.
But, not everything needs to be taken in a defensive way. Not everything is an attack. And I think that that's where a lot of the conflict comes from, because asking someone, okay, we're talking about buying a house, and what is that deed going to look like? And how's it going to work later? That doesn't mean that the other person needs to get defensive. And if they're getting
Correct.
defensive,
Right.
perhaps this is a sign of other things to come and things that you should be on the lookout for, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if it's you that's getting defensive, I mean, maybe the place to start is to look inward, and to just find out, because again, marriage is a compromise, and these big life transitions, wherever you may go, is significant. So you need to be comfortable with having these what appears to be uncomfortable conversations, and they don't have to be. It doesn't have to
Mm-hmm.
always be adversarial, and it doesn't have to be so confrontational, especially if you are able to have it in a moment where you're both clear and you're both of sound mind, and you both can reasonably put in your input and like work towards a solution.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what it's about at the end of the day. So many things that can be prevented, but the biggest thing, like I said, is people need to be forward looking. People need to have that internal dialogue, and
Sure.
then, talk about it with the person that's most appropriate, so that
Mm-hmm.
you don't find yourself not understanding, how did we get here, right?
Yeah,
Or how
absolutely.
has this happened, or how is it possible, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, with my practice, I take a much more holistic approach, I feel, than other attorneys, just because a lot of clients even themselves say, okay, well, what's going to happen in the divorce? I need to know exactly what's going to happen. I tell them, okay, let's calm down, and this is a process, right? There's a lot that we need to talk about, but we also need to talk about practicality, right? Because when people are like, I need this much alimony, I say, okay, do you understand what it takes to qualify to purchase a house? Where are you going to go once you have that check? How many payments do you need in order to qualify to buy something later, right?
Right.
What is your budget for other things? Who's going to take care of your children while you're at work? There's this long-term thing. What are you going to do if this person who's
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be paying you doesn't pay? Because
Right.
unfortunately, the court is full of that too. People not paying alimony and child support. And now you need to go hire a lawyer to get them to pay what they're supposed to pay you in the beginning. It's terrible.
Right.
And so that's why I try to take a long-term approach, thinking about those logistics and saying of ways, how can we ensure a result today where you won't have to see me again?
Correct.
While that may be bad for business, it's good for me because I'm happy, letting people, and that's why I always say transition into a new phase of your life. I don't want to just sit here and litigate nonsense. I really truly want to help people move into this new stage and think about all of these things that perhaps they hadn't thought about before.
Yeah, I don't think that's bad for business at all. I think that's amazing practice. That's probably some of the best, best types of practice that you can implement into what you do. And I think, you being so forward thinking and thinking about the long term about one's life can save people hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And the back end, as you go back and forth on things that should have been addressed at the forefront. So, you're saving a lot of people, you're being very effective and efficient in terms of your practice area. So, I mean, I think it's wonderful what you do, honestly. And I don't say that because we're friends or co-hosts. I really just truly admire in terms of your area of expertise and what you do. So how does somebody,
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, I mean, let everybody know, what is the name of your law firm? How can we get a hold of you if anybody has any questions? Shameless plug. Here we
Shameless plug. So Peña Law Office, my last name, Peña Law Office, Tri-County area in South Florida. My website is peñalawoffice.com. You can also find me online and Instagram and all that good stuff at Peña Law Office. The phone number for the firm, 561-822-3493. And we are a fully bilingual law firm. So for individuals that have either friends or their family who, maybe they speak English, but they really want to be able to talk to someone in their own language. We all speak Spanish. Myself, my receptionist, my paralegal, my associate attorney, we're a team of 4. We all speak Spanish, and that's a really big thing for people, especially down here, that it's needed a lot. So, because there's a difference, as Missy, with speaking Spanish and maybe being able to order at a restaurant in Spanish, right?
Yeah, I hear you. Can be completely different things. Yeah. So when you say Tri-County, we're talking about Broward County, we're talking about Palm Beach County, and
Miami.
Out in Miami. Okay, so Dade County. So there you have it, everybody. Thank you so much, Connie, for a wonderful and thorough discussion in terms of family law and, what your area of practice is and all of the wonderful considerations that maybe we're not thinking about in the beginning, but definitely are important and can and most likely can come into play in your life, and, what you can do to, kind of handle that at the beginning, so to avoid issues or pitfalls at the end, God forbid. So, have you or someone been through a similar experience? Do you have any questions for Connie about any of the situations or, the issues that she's addressed? Have you been involved in? Do you know of somebody that's involved in these kinds of situations? Hit her up. But more importantly, if you also have any issues or questions or comments for us, you're also welcome to address it to us directly. You can follow us on Instagram at Lawbogadas, or just email us at info@lawbogadas.com. So thank you again for another wonderful episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Give us your input on what else you want to hear, what you want in the next coming weeks. And, till then, see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Missy. Bye.
Bye.